I wonder how many people will have an Anton Ego-esque childhood flashback when I say the phrase the Jumpstart games. This was a huge series of titles that focus hard on gamified education software, being particularly popular in the United States as part of 90s and 2000s kids' digital education. And when I say this series was huge, it was huge. There are so many entries into this series, it's impossible for the majority of people to have the same picture of a Jumpstart game in their head at the same time. Depending on your age, some will remember the early titles from the classic series played from the home or school computer, or the console titles that expanded the series to new game genres, or most likely while you're watching this video, the Jumpstart MMO. Oh, no, not that one. This one. So in this video, we're specifically focusing on the 2009 MMO World of Jumpstart, or Jumpstart Virtual 3D World as it's otherwise known. We're going to be exploring its lifetime and discussing every single detail I could find about this once beloved internet space. In my opinion, this virtual world is a bit of a hidden gem. It was a high quality, detailed and well thought out virtual space for kids, with a lot of popularity and love from players. But as is the common fate of kid-specific MMOs, time eventually got the better of not just the site, but the company behind the game itself. Now I know a lot of people have different names and ways that they refer to this virtual world, so for my sanity, through the entirety of this video, I'm going to be referring to World of Jumpstart as World of Jumpstart. I always like to remind people at the beginning of my videos that if you do find yourself enjoying this video at any point, that you consider dropping it a like and subscribing to see many more videos like this one. I also do want to give a huge shout out to our one and only channel member, Rex Drinks Red Bulls. They have been a member of my channel for like a good number of months now, and I just wanted to give you a extra shout out in this video just to give you a huge thank you for all of your continued support on my work and my content. But with that out of the way, without further ado, let's jump on into the world of Jumpstart. World of Jumpstart, also known as Jumpstart Virtual 3D World or Jumpstart Virtual World, was produced by Knowledge Adventure or Jumpstart Games and was officially released in March of 2009 after a beta period. It was targeted at players between the ages of 3 and 10, although I personally don't know how much a child under the age of 6 would actually get out of a virtual space like this. I feel like they can be quite overwhelming and there's a lot of different game mechanics and features that go into them, and I feel like without continuous adult supervision, it's quite hard for a 3 or 4 year old to understand what is going on. This is also one of the first MMOs that we're looking at that wasn't directly targeted towards tweens and older children. That's not to say that they didn't play it, because they definitely did, and I think a lot of people aged up with this game and found it as a source of comfort and a place to go that they'd invested a lot of time into. As is expected, upon entering the world of Jumpstart, players created their in-game counterpart, an avatar known as a Jumpy. Usernames were made up of 2 to 3 randomly generated words, one of several safety measures implemented to protect the player base. These gave names such as Emily Little Turtle or Sam Thunderhawk, and I truly hope that these became some people's lifelong gamer tags. Once their virtual self was completed, players could explore, complete missions, or play educational minigames. At launch, the map featured 5 main areas, but would very soon expand to also include Adventureland and Futureland in 2009. Along with Storyland, these were age-specific zones that unlocked as players grew older and featured more age-specific educational content. Main Street acted as the hub of the game, connecting players to other worlds and changing with the seasons, with downtown holding all the shops, such as threads, pets, and rides. Motivation for players came from a strong reward system, earning coins used for purchasing items and jump stars which were used for leveling up and placements in ranking. These were earned by engaging in the educational minigames and interacting with the site, which kept kids returning, along with a daily login bonus which was added later on in the game's lifetime. If you played World of Jumpstart for a little while, you will know that this game went through phenomenal expansion over its entire lifetime, with a long list of additional content that we'll get into in a bit more detail later on in the video. On the face of it, it's all fairly predictable and commonplace for a kids MMO of the time, but I think because of Jumpstart's track record and history of engaging children in educational software for so long, they managed to nail this every single time. There's a lot of teeny tiny details that they added to the game which aren't crazy or huge. They're little nods to common childhood wishes and dreams. Have you ever wished when you were a kid that there was a secret tunnel connecting yours and your best friend's houses? or playing in the bath and mixing together your mum's like expensive body wash and shampoo and stuff to create potions. In Jumpstart, elements like using slides to access different locations, mixing up potions to produce charms, becoming a mermaid, and riding roller coasters unlimited amounts of times really feed into those popular wishes of the vivid imagination of childhood. And whilst this definitely gave them the upper hand, they also had a sizable budget to work with, given how big the company was by the time that they started investing into a virtual space. And I think it's easy enough to say this and say like, look, they were such a huge company, they had so much money to put into this. But I think it's kind of evidenced in the early competitions that they ran when the site was first released, with prizes such as a Nintendo DS, a Wii, and a literal college scholarship, which I think not only shows their budget, but also their promise and dedication to providing educational content as well as entertainment. On top of these two other points, I do also think that another big part of World of Jumpstart's lasting success was its dedication to building trust and a relationship with the parents of the players. Outside of the game, there was a couple of features for parents, the Parent Zone forum where parents could communicate with developers and other parents of players of the game. They even went so far as to release an integrated parents game that ran through Facebook. I think it was meant to be like a spa or like relax resort place where the more a parent played, the more rewards and items that they would unlock for their children to use in World of Jumpstart. This transparency, combined with Jumpstart's existing reputation in education and ability to engage children in educational content, cemented their success and pushed the game to last for around 15 years. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Before we even begin to talk about the end of the site, let's go back right to the very beginning, to the roots of World of Jumpstart, to see where the game came from. Now, the company behind Jumpstart does have quite a detailed history, and I have tried my best to condense it down as much as possible. As we discussed in the beginning of this video, the Jumpstart Games was absolutely huge and was started by quite a small company in the early 1990s. This was called Knowledge Adventure and was founded by brothers Larry and Bill Gross along with Rick Gibson. From the start, Knowledge Adventure's focus was very clear. Educational entertainment, or edutainment as it's frequently coined. Bill Gross explained his inspiration to form the company on LinkedIn. After my son David started kindergarten, I decided to start an educational software company to help him and his friends fall in love with learning. Knowledge Adventure initially released a mix of branded and original content through the 90s. While some were independent, like the 3D adventure titles and the very first of their Jumpstart games, they also had a lot of tie-ins with brands, which I assume would have been a really good way for them to start building profit quickly. These included Fairy Tale Activity Center and Sabrina the Teenage Witch Spellbound, which me and my sister played the absolute crap out of when we were younger. The vibes and aesthetic of especially the Fairy Tale game, when I rediscovered this game, it hit me like a truck. It was crazy. I might just make a whole video about like really niche CD-ROM games that were released like this, because I feel like there was so many that I've just forgotten I experienced as a child, and a lot of you guys might have experienced too. Like, this is exactly why I love making this type of content. This early success and earned reputation led them to their first acquisition by CUC International in 1997. Just before this acquisition, in the fall of 1996, Knowledge Adventure made a pretty bold move with the release of their first MMO, Knowledge Adventureland. Whilst this is very obviously not the main topic of this video, I did want to explore this game just a little bit, given that it is a kind of like predecessor to the game that would be released just over a decade later, and given its unexpected existence. This game genuinely threw me through a loop and surprised me so much. I randomly came across it accidentally when I was wrapping up my research. I was literally just finishing up my script, clicking through some tabs on the Jumpstart wiki, and this came up and I was like, oh my god, this is kind of huge. We have to talk about this. So treat this as a kind of bonus chapter to this video. I just kind of wanted to share this with you guys because it is kind of fascinating to see a child-centric, social-based MMO quite early on in the gaming industry's history. I feel like when you look at it like just for what it is, without like delving any deeper, it may seem kind of crude and kind of like crappy looking, but honestly, it was so ahead of its time, given that kid-friendly and kid-centric MMOs wouldn't take off until the mid-2000s. One incredibly simple, I think it's actually pretty well thought out, featuring collaborative games, card trading, real-time text-to-voice chat, avatars that could emote, and a sizable 2.5D world to explore. There was even a weekly event calendar run on the Knowledge Adventure website, and it's just fascinating to see how early the concept and idea of a child-friendly virtual space was like being thought of and explored as a game genre. And I do think it definitely foreshadows World of Jumpstart, which would come out just over a decade later, especially in terms of its aesthetic and some of the content in the game and the customization options. I also don't know exactly when this game closed or when it was taken down, but I assume it was around the late 90s / maybe even the early 2000s. Heading into the 2000s, this is where we really start to see Jumpstart as a company really find itself and develop into what would later become World of Jumpstart and the people behind that. The Jumpstart universe just kept expanding, and the company behind the game and the team that was producing them had really secured themselves a strong position in the edutainment market. Alongside its continued PC releases, the rise of console gaming meant that the company branched out to new platforms, like GameCube, Game Boy Color and Advance, and PlayStation. However, change was on the horizon once again, and in 2004, Vivendi, formerly known as Havas, sold the company to two California investing firms. As technology advanced and profits grew, the Jumpstart games began evolving in both quality and design. The new Jumpstart 3D World series reflected this shift, according to the wiki, beginning with Jumpstart Phonics Read and Rhyme, and then progressing into 3D open world titles with educational minigames for specific age groups. Out of these releases, one in particular stood out, My First Adventure, a preschool level title that introduced the first customizable human avatar and featured parental progress updates. This was released in May 2008, and later that year we would see the announcement of their new MMO, World of Jumpstart. Little was actually known or shared about the actual development of World of Jumpstart. I think the original Jumpstart preschool My First Adventure title that we discussed that was released in May 2008 is actually considered the original World of Jumpstart kind of like prototype or foundations of the game that it then developed from. Then CEO David Lord explained the shift. With the explosive growth of the virtual world and online gaming market, we are looking for a partner that could help bring our games online. Unity's multi-platform technology fit perfectly with our strategy to leverage our trusted Jumpstart and Math Blaster brands to deliver a rich, safe, and fun virtual world experience for kids anywhere, anytime. The public beta for World of Jumpstart then launched in December of 2008, entering a booming market for kid-focused MMOs. Games like Club Penguin, Our World, Fantage, and Movie Star Planet had already proven the genre's success and profitability. Jumpstart's move into the space seemed natural. Unlike others, it brought genuine educational value and long-standing trust from parents. This blend of fun, learning, and familiarity helped World of Jumpstart succeed where others struggled to stand out in a market that was beginning to feel bloated. So the beta version of World of Jumpstart that launched in December attracted over 1.5 million gameplay sessions, with players averaging about 45 minutes per session. Early coverage from TechCrunch praised the game's visuals and variety, noting, "The game has high production values with rich 3D graphics, customizable avatars, and a large world to explore, though at launch there's only one multiplayer game." After this positive start in their beta period, Jumpstart followed through on their promises and officially launched the full game in March 2009, with new content like Adventureland, the Buggy Racer game, and a ranking system. But the real transformation into an MMO occurred in late summer, around July, August time, with the addition of player interactions, emotes, and safe chat features between avatars. One thing I don't see a lot of people complaining about in reviews for this game is the price, which is really, really refreshing. Especially in the context of that I don't think they ever introduced microtransactions into the game, which is quite rare for virtual spaces, especially those that were targeted at kids and had additional customization systems. But although there wasn't any microtransactions, there was a membership option that initially cost $7.99 a month, which increased to $8.99 initially. It may have increased more, but these are the two prices that I saw. There was also a one-time payment option of $30 for a forever membership. Personally, having looked at other MMOs and prices that occurred on those, I don't think this is that egregious, especially when you consider that this price not only enabled you access to World of Jumpstart, the MMO, but also pretty much their entire catalogue of game series. They also allowed multiple accounts under one membership, offering not one, not two, but 6 different accounts per membership. So the World of Jumpstart game was commonly marketed as being free to play, but it in fact was not all free. There was a pretty heavy paywall, heavy in terms of how much was put behind the paywall. Unless you paid the monthly subscription or you paid for the forever membership, you could only access a very, very small part of the game, which I don't think was marketed overly aggressively towards players. But I do think it would have been very, very enticing and tempting to children when they were playing the game and they realized just what they couldn't access, especially because these were the more attractive and more appealing desired parts of the game. It's not perfect, and I think the fact that they definitely openly marketed this as a free to play site for children, and then obviously realizing when you get in there that you have to pay for 90% of it, is kind of sneaky, but it's definitely the lesser of evils compared to the other MMOs that we've looked at from the time, especially when you consider that there's no microtransactions and there's no gambling. So after its release period, I think World of Jumpstart definitely saw its most successful time in between 2009 and 2013, which was a period packed with updates and new content releases. Similar to my Sims Freeplay video, I'm going to give a very, very brief overview of some of the key features that were added in this time. In late 2009, the team added pets, Marine Land, which was an underwater zone with missions and the chance to become mermaid, and seasonal decorations with a variety of Western holidays. The biggest launch that year was definitely Futureland, aimed at ages 9 to 12, alongside 2 key features: rides, which were vehicles and mounts that could be purchased with coins, and buddies, which was the new friending system. By early 2010, players could enter customizable homes through a neighborhood feature and host in-game parties from them. A more controversial idea that was kind of similar and ran alongside this was the Best Buddy contest, offering rewards for recruiting friends. This is something we've seen plenty of times across the virtual world and MMO space, and it kind of essentially works as free marketing for the company to get their players to go out and tell a load of their friends to join the site so that they can get exclusive rewards. Many parents on Facebook obviously expressed dislike and concern for this feature or this contest, which I can definitely understand. Obviously, kids aren't going to be able to necessarily see through that, but the parents definitely will. And this is the one place where Jumpstart's transparency and openness with communication with the parents of their players really did not serve them well. And for good reason too. Don't get me wrong, I do not agree with this sneaky marketing thing that they tried to do, and I think it's totally fair that a lot of parents were complaining about this online and were quite cross about it. I'd be cross too if I had children and a company was trying to use them as a marketing tool. New areas soon followed, the Enchanted Sanctuary, which allowed players to hatch dragons. This later expanded to Pegasi and Horn Howleys and also Griffins, I think, and these were then called Miffies, which became a really big fan favourite part of the site. Science Land and Windy Hollows, a richly themed magic world with broom flying and charm crafting, were also added. This was such a popular location in the game that they also decided to produce a graphic novel outside of the game, following 5 characters attending a magic school set in Windy Hollows. This really reminds me of the graphic novels that Star Stable Online released, and I think it's a really cute idea and a really nice way to kind of pull kids away from the more digital side of it and allow them to engage with a universe that they really love in like book form and encourage them to read. By 2011, the larger gameplay updates slowed, but the team behind the game continued to add a lot of smaller features like the first roller coaster, the Octo Lair, which had a VIP room. They also added in themed fun zones that would change every month or so, and each time it changed, it would have a different theme. So I know there was a flower growing one, and there was also like a pirate one at some point. I think that might have been the first ever one. I think it's a really clever way for the company to introduce new content and keep the site feeling fresh and new for people who had been playing the game for a while or were playing the game a lot and sinking a lot of hours into it. That same year, in 2011, World of Jumpstart won Best Website for Kids and acquired another virtual kids world called Super Secret. Now, this is an MMO that has been on my radar for a little while. I don't have any plans to make a video on it. Izzy's actually has a really, really good detailed video about it, kind of similar to the structure of how I do my videos. So if you want to know more about that one, go and check it out. I know from watching that video that Jumpstart's acquisition of this did not serve it very well. By this stage, the 2011-2012 timeframe, World of Jumpstart had really found its place. Now, don't get me wrong, it was never a record breaker and it would never hit the levels of, say, Club Penguin or Mushy Monsters, but it was a really creative and immersive space that was well loved and balanced learning with adventure and kept thousands of kids entertained. But there is a big question that pops up at this point in an MMO's lifetime, and that is just how much longer can they keep up this momentum? I personally think, objectively, based on the research that I've done and its overall lifetime, World of Jumpstart hit its peak in the 2012 to 2013 period. These were the last major years for World of Jumpstart with consistent content, updates, and releases. Around this time, Knowledge Adventure, the company behind the game, began shifting and rebranding, becoming known as Jumpstart Games in October 2012, which I assume was a way for them to modernize and associate themselves more specifically with their most popular series, the Jumpstart games, but also focus themselves as a brand to reorientate for the new market of mobile gaming. As is common in the virtual world catalogue, many MMOs and virtual spaces turn to brand tie-ins or collaborations in order to gain profit. Now, World of Jumpstart was no stranger to this, and unlike most, they actually went really, really big with their brand collaborations, introducing what would become a fan favourite part of the game. In September 2012, they teased a top secret project, later revealed as a collaboration with DreamWorks Madagascar. Now, this wasn't some small in-game event that lasted a couple of months that had a teeny tiny area where people could go, unlock a couple of things, play a mini game and then leave and forget about it. No, this was huge, and they actually added multiple in-game areas with their own minigames and gameplay experiences, featuring in-movie locations like New York, Penguins HQ, and Central Park Zoo. Now, both of these crossovers were so successful that they actually inspired two standalone worlds specific to each, World of Madagascar and School of Dragons. There were even traces of an unreleased Scooby-Doo event or collab, according to a modder who uncovered unused game content. Beyond partnerships, Jumpstart made a pretty major business move, acquiring the virtual world site Neopets in March of 2014. From the outside, along with their purchase of Super Secret, it seemed like the company was aiming to become the hub for child-friendly online spaces. So I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but basically, after this acquisition, a lot of longtime fans of Neopets were quite upset and disappointed because they felt like the game was being ignored and neglected, and I think the loss of that personal connection from the original founders really did affect Neopets quite a lot. Other than its line of games, Jumpstart Games also expanded its community presence on social media. Their Facebook page became more active, sharing not just updates but also worksheets, parenting tips, and craft ideas, reflecting on the rise of social media as a marketing tool for businesses and virtual worlds. Initially, this Facebook page was just for World of Jumpstart news, but it shifted to becoming more general and a hub for Jumpstart Games information to be shared. And just as things were getting great and it seemed to all be settling and the game was cruising along, we do start to hit the decline phase of World of Jumpstart. So now let's take a look into the how and why of World of Jumpstart's decline. And Jumpstart was not alone in this. Many other children's virtual worlds and MMOs were fading out as they began to show their age and the market shifted in favor of mobile gaming. And given that the majority of virtual spaces came out in between like the 2006-2009 period, by this time, we were in like 2014-2015, a lot of players have aged up and out of enjoying this type of content and no longer engaged with the site. And I do think Jumpstart knew this, and they were trying to be smart about how they tried to keep these aging players customers of theirs. They began pivoting resources towards more app game development, releasing titles like Magic and Miffy's in September 2015, a mobile MMORPG inspired by World of Jumpstart's Windy Hollows and its ever-popular Miffy's. What I don't think was expected was the removal of the beloved Madagascar content in late 2014 to early 2015. The team announced that the Penguins would be moving to their own standalone game, World of Madagascar. While World of Jumpstart regained its older areas back, like Speedrome and Boardwalk, which had been removed to make space for the Madagascar areas, many players were frustrated at losing such a central fan favourite part of the world. The same pattern continued in 2016 when Jumpstart removed Storyland to create a separate virtual space, Jumpstart Junior. Now this is a logical step, given that they were splitting up content for younger players. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, virtual worlds and MMO spaces can have a lot of features and can be quite vast, and I think for younger players, especially given that they were targeting this game to 3, 4 and 5-year-olds, it's not really that accessible for them, as their understanding of this type of stuff just isn't at a level yet where they can really appreciate and sit down and engage with this type of content, unless they've got an adult sat with them, guiding them along. So whether it was successful or not, it makes sense for them to split up the content this way. But along with the removal of the Madagascar content, this was severely diluting World of Jumpstart's identity and community across another virtual world. You're asking people who once had access to all of these things through one game to join not 1, not 2, but 3 virtual worlds in order to access all of this again. And I can imagine that these all had memberships and their own pricing options. So if anything, it's a bit of a money grab that they did this. Then came the avatar redesign, which became one of the most controversial updates in the game's history. The fact that people were openly comparing this update and the appearance of the new avatars to an eating disorder is incredibly insensitive, but I can agree why people were quite upset at the new visuals of their avatars. The design of avatars for social spaces and MMOs is often a feature that defines one virtual world from another. Not only do they bring the energy, vitality, and literal life forms to these spaces, the player that creates them produces a form of attachment to them, especially when a lot of time and resources are put into the game and they're creating a virtual counterpart of themselves. The change of avatars in Jumpstart's case is actually quite intense, going from proportional figures with flat facial features to 3D heads that were proportionally quite big compared to the body and had new designs for the eyes, nose and mouth. Given that this is quite a stark change that I can imagine came unannounced, I can appreciate why a lot of people were upset with this. I can assume that this was a way that they were intending to modernize the site for new audiences, but this is again an example of where the kid-friendly and virtual space failed to mature and develop with its player base. A company is trying to modernize and keep it relevant so that they can keep the site running with high player counts, but then trying to balance that with the trust and loyalty of their longtime fans who have played the game perhaps since the beginning. And this is another example of where even Jumpstart, who was so well versed in producing content for children, was failing to find that sweet spot between keeping old-time fans happy but also modernizing the site for new audiences. And after these things that were both in and out of their control, World of Jumpstart definitely entered a clear downturn. The dilution of the site's features, the shifting market, and potential alienation of longtime fans through content changes or removals all contributed to the beginning of its decline, echoing the fate of many children's MMOs from the same era. So, what really killed World of Jumpstart in the end? When the beginning of the end of Flash was announced in 2017, a lot of virtual worlds were quite frankly doomed, and in some cases, many of them began rebuilding their sites from scratch. World of Jumpstart wasn't actually one of these, thankfully, as it had been built in Unity, downloadable for years, and even available on mobile. But I can imagine that this would have been a problem for some of their minigames and game features, a potential challenge for the company that would soon acquire Jumpstart Games, NetDragon Websoft. NetDragon purchased Jumpstart in July 2017 as part of its goal to become the world's largest company for online learning. Based on revenue reports from 2015, most of NetDragon's profits still came from its existing games, but it was actively expanding and researching into the education sector. This was reinforced by their earlier acquisition of Promethean, a major educational tech firm, in 2015, followed by Jumpstart Games 2 years later. In a press release, NetDragon praised Jumpstart's impressive and popular educational games, describing the deal as a way to tap into their excellent relationship with DreamWorks and to create world-class learning products. After acquisition, World of Jumpstart's socials and content specific to this fell very, very quiet. However, Jumpstart Games as a company still found some success, releasing Jumpstart Academy Math in 2018. Surprisingly, instead of letting World of Jumpstart quietly fade away into irrelevancy, they did keep it running and actually began reproducing and revitalizing the site, which I assume was under the instruction of NetDragon. They began posting World of Jumpstart specific social content once again, updating parts of the game like redesigning the Enchanted Sanctuary, adding new Miffys, and even a skating rink. Around the time, they also began very briefly trying to remarket Math Blaster, which was an MMO specific to maths content, obviously, which was released a little bit later on after World of Jumpstart, I believe. But they kind of ran alongside each other, and I don't think Math Blaster was ever as successful as World of Jumpstart, but it was definitely there and a lot of people played it. As you might have noticed, this revival came just before the Big C, which in theory, a time that should have been ideal for Jumpstart's brand of digital home learning. According to NetDragon's 2021 annual report, they saw profits rise across the board, but their education revenue rose by a staggering 32%, as the pandemic apparently drove the adoption of classroom technology. Yet despite this growth, Jumpstart was notably absent from most of the report, only being mentioned once. And not for a good reason. Trademarks with indefinite useful life arising from the acquisition of Jumpstart Games and Edmodo respectively were fully impaired during the year ended 31 December 2020. That basically means that Jumpstart was considered worth nothing that year. Potentially its losses had either matched or exceeded its profits, and for a company that should have boomed during this time period, that's pretty worrying. And as if financial troubles weren't enough, Jumpstart Games actually found themselves facing a lawsuit, and not because of World of Jumpstart. In early 2023, Neopets, which as we mentioned had been acquired by Jumpstart Games in the mid-2010s, actually found itself the center of a class action lawsuit filed by Bianca Nigrin, following a data breach that reportedly began as early as January 2021. The breach exposed personal and sensitive information to dark web sellers, including emails, passwords, and IP addresses, and was allegedly very, very preventable. Worse still, Jumpstart had apparently done little to inform players about what exactly had been leaked. After a few months of back and forth, the case was voluntarily dismissed in June 2023, which, funnily enough, was the same month that Jumpstart Games announced the discontinuation of all its titles and the closure of the company after 32 years in operation. Now, neither Jumpstart Games nor NetDragon gave an official explanation as for why the site closed down, but I think it's clear to see from what we've discussed that Falling profits and potentially this lawsuit being a final nail in the coffin for the company definitely were big contributors to the site and the company having its eventual closure. And with that, World of Jumpstart became another casualty of the children's virtual world landscape. And like those that came before it, it had its rise, its golden years, and eventually its fall, leaving behind a shattered community and a lasting mark on the world of childhood nostalgia. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, for me personally, World of Jumpstart is a bit of a hidden gem, and I had never heard of it or even seen it discussed anywhere until someone suggested it as a potential video topic in one of the comments of another video. It was never particularly big, but it meant a lot to so many kids and tweens who experienced its world. It was more than just a game to so many, shaping identities and providing a community and world to escape to as we grew up. Whilst I never played this one myself, I can appreciate the feeling of loss and bittersweet nostalgia that comes with the memories and tributes scattered on the internet. On that note, I am aware that scattered on the internet, there are a few rewritten or rebooted versions of World of Jumpstart out there. And whilst I appreciate that for a lot of people, this is something that I should be covering in the video, I don't encourage people to go and search out these sites just because I've done that in the past, and it turns out that some people who produce these sites have less than good intentions for why they are doing it. Basically taking advantage of people's childhood nostalgia. Obviously, if anyone shares any virtual worlds or spaces in the comments, I'm not going to remove them, but please be very, very careful before downloading anything, or if anyone asks for your money, do not give it to them. It's not worth it. And on that note, that is the end of this video. I really do hope you enjoyed. This one was really interesting for me. It was once again a world that I had never experienced, kind of like our world. So it was really nice to look into something new and learn about another virtual space that meant so much to so many people. I do always ask at the end of my videos that if you did enjoy this video at any point, that you consider dropping it a like, maybe a comment, share a memory that you have of this game if you played it, or perhaps maybe a game series or potential MMO that you would like me to cover in the future, as it really, really helps out my video. I also once again want to thank everyone, particularly my channel member Rex Drinks Red Bull, for their continued support of my content and work. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching. Hydrate to stay great, get your daily calorie intake, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.